Good evening. This meeting is open to the public and is available through the online platform. Please subscribe to the Township of Wilmot YouTube channel to watch the live stream or view after the meeting. Delegations must register with the Information and Legislative Services Department. The only matters being discussed at this meeting are those on the agenda. Good evening and welcome to Wilmot Township Council meeting on October 4, 2021. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that the month of October is Islamic Heritage Month. This is a time to celebrate Muslim culture, history, and religion. It is a time for reflection, learning, and celebration. I encourage everyone to learn and celebrate by visiting muslimlink.ca. That's muslimlink.ca for a complete list of local events. Now I'll ask Councillor Fisher to read the land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibilities to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. We have two additions to the agenda for this evening. And a motion that recommend that item 12.1.2 be added to the agenda under reports as report COR 2021-035 Project Grand River, and that item 6.1 be added to the agenda under announcement as Mayor Armstrong's update on inclusion, diversity, and anti-racism education. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now we need a motion that the agenda as presented for October 4, 2021 be adopted. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. Next is the minutes of previous meetings. Recommendation that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as presented. Regular council meeting, September 27th, 2021. That is moved by Councillor. You have a question, Councillor Gordick? No, she's moving it, and Councillor Gordick and Councillor Fenning. Any comments, questions, corrections, or omissions? Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. To Ms. Middleholtz, I just wanted to say thank you. It wasn't reflected in the minutes with regards to the request for the update with the September 30th Day of Reconciliation with some of the events and literature that the township had sent out. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for the diversity page that has gone up that included those. So I appreciate that, and the link being put up on the website. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Page 13, where it comments on the confirming of the photographs of the building being demolished. I just want to clarify that it was also discussed about harvesting, if that's the correct term, just any artifacts that may be of interest to the township. So maybe the minutes could just reflect that.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, certainly we can make that that change in the minutes to comment on that as well.
Great, thank you.
So that recommendation will be amended. So all in favor as amended. Carried. Thank you. So no public meetings this evening. So first up is a presentation. And I think Ashton's going to introduce.
We're good.
Go ahead, Ashton.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. So tonight we have Mary Jane Patterson, Executive Director from REAP Green Solutions for their annual update to Council. REAP Green Solutions plays a major role within Waterloo Region, including here in Wilmot. As noted in the report, REAP participates on a number of local initiatives such as home energy audits, including home water efficiency in conjunction with the region of Waterloo. REAP Green Solutions is also co-lead of Climate Action Waterloo Region initiative, as you all know, from recent history, was responsible for spearheading the Transform Waterloo Region community plan that was endorsed by all municipal councils in the region of Waterloo. I'd like to thank Mary Jane and the rest of your team for the work that you put in the organization, and I look forward to our continued partnership. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it to Mary Jane for their impact report.
Thank you. Welcome, Mary Jane.
Thank you. That's the first time I've been introduced. That was excellent. Thank you, Ashton. You can all hear me well enough?
I believe we can, yes.
Okay. Well, let me get started. I am very happy to be with you tonight, Mayor Armstrong, councillors, staff, and viewers, to present REAP's work over the past year. Our last fiscal year pretty much aligned with the first year of COVID. And you have our report, and I'll just present some highlights here that we're very happy to share with you. Next slide, please. As you know, REAP's mandate is practical action in the community. For the past year, our work has been guided by this new 10-year goal that we set for ourselves, thinking about the importance of 2030 for climate action. And our goal is 10,000 meaningful actions that we've had an impact on, and transitioning to a resilient, low-carbon future. Next slide, please. In our first fiscal year of this goal, we made it almost 10%, and that was during a pandemic. And we also have over twice as many supportive actions. And to give you an idea of what we mean, attending a workshop about tree stewardship would be a supportive action. Planting a tree in your backyard would be a meaningful action because that makes change happen. So moving on to the next slide, we can give you an example of this in our work. This past year, we helped local residents plant over almost 3,000 native species and over 100 trees and almost 100 shrubs. And these are in the ground now, feeding the soil, sheltering urban wildlife, providing shade, and anchoring the stormwater. The demand for these programs was quite strong this year. And I saw on Twitter recently the good work that Wilmot Township's been doing planting trees. So I know you appreciate the benefits and the beauty that these trees provide. Next slide, please. As you know, oops, I skipped one. Did I skip one? Thank you. As you know, we're also supporting residents on safeguarding our water resources. With the region of Waterloo, we deliver water reviews that help people conserve water inside their home And where it is possible, we install measures right on the spot that immediately start saving water. Things like toilet flappers to stop leaks or high efficiency shower heads. So this past year, we were able to install 216 of these upgrades, and we were able to visit 3 homes in Wilmot to provide this service also. So very happy to do that. We're also still very involved in raising awareness of stormwater management. And so 12 rain gardens went into the ground this year that will start storing water right away. And that reduces the runoff that goes into our living streams and rivers. Next slide, please. Ashton, you mentioned this. It's been one of the most important initiatives or actions of this past year, passing Transform WR. And we've been working on it for 2 years with Sustainable Waterloo Region and all of our municipalities around the table, including Ashton representing Wilmot Township. Transform WR calls for us to transform the ways we move, the ways we build and operate our buildings, the ways we consume and waste, and the ways we relate to each other. And a lot of our work at REAP directly aligns with this and helps to achieve these goals. Next slide, please. Home energy evaluations are one example of that. You see a blower door in action here, assessing the heat or the air loss in a home. We were able to do 175 of these this past year, even in the middle of a lockdown. That was very important. And a very important initiative was launched this year by the federal government, the Greener Homes Program, which launched in the lockdown. So we saw a lot of demand for this, and we have a waiting list as we continue to crew up to meet the waiting list expectations. 3 Wilmot Township residents upgraded the energy efficiency of their homes last year, and I noted that they reduced about 20% on average of the energy in their home. It was a total of 5 tons of greenhouse gas emissions that they saved. And they will save that again this year, which makes 10, and next year and onward. So those are change, those are meaningful actions. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes. And I think we had several Wilmot residents on the waiting list for this year. Next slide, please. This past year was the end of our 2-year Project Neutral project, which is an online platform where we can log on and find out our own household carbon emissions and what we can do about it. You see the number of people who logged on this past year. Over the 2 years, it was over 2,000 people who logged on. They don't all contact us to tell us if they did anything, but the ones that did reported 111 actions that they took as a result of participating in this. Over those 2 years, we had 66 people from Wilmot Township participate in Project Neutral. That's excellent. That beats all the other townships, hands down. And we were at a lot of different community events and workshops, inviting businesses, community groups, and schools to try out their own carbon footprint. Next slide, please. We did manage to have a couple of socially distanced in-person workshops last year. I think both of them were about tree stewardship, but COVID really moved all of our rest of our workshops online. And it was very interesting to see how that opened up more participation from people that might not have been able to make it out in person, including from other parts of Canada and even the United States. So I'm curious as we go forward, how we will blend that as we come out of COVID. Next slide, please. This month is the Zero Waste Challenge. Last year, we saw lots of people participating, even though the pandemic probably had an impact on people's excitement about this, but you would not have known it from these participants who had a lot of fun online, inspiring each other and sharing tips. And this year we are off already. I've got my jar started. The 30-day challenge began on October 1st. You can see I've got some discoveries here, and I've already heard a tip online when I showed this about saving those little things inside a vitamin bottle that keeps it dry, because that can help dry out your electronics if they get wet. So I'm going to be fishing that back out of there. When I presented to regional council, Mayor Armstrong, you may remember that Chair Redmond really threw down the gauntlet, I think, for other councilors. So we would like to invite all of you to participate and get your jar. The 7-day challenge begins on, I think it's October 16th. Yes, that's the 7-day challenge. It is really eye-opening, and it's not about whether you make it to the end, it's about what you learn and how you, what are you going to change going forward to help reduce what we send to landfill. And I realize I haven't explained that the goal is to put anything you can't recycle or compost into this mason jar. And that shows you what's going right to landfill. So have fun, dive in, put some posts up and see what you can learn. Next slide, please. I think this breakdown of our expenses is a nice kind of illustration of the variety of programs we have. And when I took a look at them, I felt we had a pretty good balance of climate change mitigation, reduce and adaptation to help us adapt to our changing climate and reduce flood risk through many different ways, native species, tree stewardship, etc. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, we've got 3 programs that are coming up the pike and getting us excited. The Tree Trust is going to provide professional arborist care for mature trees to keep them going, sequestering carbon, providing shade, anchoring the soil. That will be funded through donations. On the right, you see overcoming barriers to home energy upgrades. We are designing a home energy retrofit program that I think of as providing wraparound support for homeowners to help them through the things that are difficult about making your home more energy efficient. And Ashton has been an integral part of those meetings. And Project Neutral's entering a new phase. We are working with high school students this year to design a program called Kids Cutting Carbon, which is asking the students to go home with that platform and just understand their own household emissions with their family. Next slide, please. As we end the report, we can't resist updating that bar that we showed you at the beginning, because since the fiscal year end on March 31st, we have now reached 14% of our target for 2030, close to 1,500 meaningful actions. So despite what's going on with the pandemic, we see really strong interest and participation from Waterloo Region in programs that make a difference and that are part of sustainable living. Last slide, please. So I want to end with our most important message, and that is a very big thank you. Mayor Armstrong, you are part of the Regional Council, which provides core funding for REAP. And we could not do this without that core funding. It really gives us that foundation that allows us to go out and seek funding and programs and bring them to our community. We also want to say a very special thanks to the township staff that we get to work with on a regular basis. And that is Ashton in particular. Thank you, Ashton, for participating in these programs with us and helping us bring the township perspective as we design an energy retrofit program and a climate action strategy for Waterloo Region. And Sandy Jackson also, it's been great to have your participation as well. So with that, I want to say thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mary Jane. And yes, Ashton has been very deeply into all of this for many years now. So he's been a force to reckon with here at the township for quite a while. So thank you. Now, any questions or comments on Mary Jane's report? Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. So thank you for the presentation, Mary Jane. It's always nice to hear some of the initiatives that are happening. One of the ones that I'm interested in myself is the rain garden program that you have. I'd like to see us do a little bit more about that. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that and how that works. And what does it actually mean with regards to building a rain garden with our residents so that maybe we can do it on our own, perhaps not necessarily with REIT, but just kind of have an idea of what that does and how it helps with the runoff that you had mentioned.
Okay. It is something that we often do in partnership with the municipality. So the programs we have right now are primarily Kitchener and Guelph, I think, where we're working with them as they form a stormwater utility and encourage people to reduce the runoff that's leaving their property. And one of the best ways to get started is to have a demonstration one that's in the community in a visible space. So I'm thinking of the DPAVE that we did in New Hamburg as a good example of that kind of community work together and a demonstration. Grain Garden is an excellent community project because we are essentially, the way you create it is dig down, you measure the capacity, the stormwater storage capacity you want to have there, and you dig down 3 or 4 feet to create a hole that will hold that capacity of water. And then you don't replace it with that hard packed earth. You put in porous materials like stones or compost or mulch or sand that help, or a combination of all of that that can hold water. And then on the top, you can put soil or even stones, but you can plant a beautiful garden on top with plants that are usually native species and pollinators that can withstand both drought and wet conditions. And we can put a sign there, and we have several of these throughout the region where we have explained how a rain garden works with a diagram on the sign. And that gives people a visible demonstration of the fact that it can be beautiful and kind of like a secret garden or a secret storage tank underneath that lets rainwater gently filter down and restore the groundwater instead of turning into runoff. And then on our website, we have lots of good resources. I think we've got something like Rain Gardens 101 or something to that effect, and instructions on how to create your own. So that would be one way to start. When we're working closely with the municipality, they are sometimes funding us to be a coach, and then we do an individual visit to someone's home, to different people's homes, and show them, help them even design it for their property.
Okay, follow up through you, Mayor. So can you give us a couple of locations for people to go and take a look at for themselves? And so you sort of answered the next part I was going to ask, but they don't necessarily have to do with stormwater. So for example, in some of our communities that we have here where there's, I live in an area where there's lots of homes where we have a lot of grass. And so the runoff from that, especially if it's depending on the time of year, is quite excessive. Would that, so it doesn't necessarily have to be at stormwaters, you could have it done within a residential community so that it could alleviate some of the grass and the runoff, the droughts with the grass. Is that correct?
Yes, I do think of that as stormwater. Let's say you've got a downspout at your front yard that's heading straight over the grass because it's pretty hard packed into the street. Instead, you could have that downspout drain into a rain garden right there and so you've got some pollinator species, you're getting rid of that turf and you're diversifying the front yard. You're doing a lot of really good things at once. You might even be solving a problem if it was being dumped kind of close to your foundation and coming into your basement. And you may be solving a problem for somebody downstream from you who had it flowing from your house down into their basement. So
then follow up, then we have some, as you know, New Hamburg is filled with lots of flood areas, as well as actually probably a lot of the township, not just, but New Hamburg seems to be affected quite a lot. There are some areas here where we no longer build up on. Could those potential areas, would that be something for staff if we were to ask to look at some of those areas to put in rain gardens in sort of not used land area? Would that be something that would help with flooding and keeping the rainwater to come in?
If I understand you, you mean not necessarily in someone's front yard or backyard. Well, that's a good question. We haven't done anything that wasn't on private property or in somebody's yard. It's kind of been the idea that the municipality might have their own work that they're doing. So our job is to connect with homeowners and encourage them to do the same. So for example, the city of Kitchener is doing road work, and we're going to be working with the residents that are adjacent to that road work. So while they see the city taking action to reduce flooding in their neighborhood, we're going to encourage them to do the same. and try to install rain gardens there. And we one demonstration, you asked about a demonstration garden. There's one at the City of Waterloo Service Center that we put in last year that could be a good example, but I will make a note and send you a couple of examples that are demonstrations in Waterloo region.
Thank you. Any further questions? So we have a resolution that reports COR 2021-131 REAP Green Solutions Impact Report 2020-2021 be received for information purposes. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Jane. Appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye-bye all.
Bye. Next item is the consent agenda. And there's one report. Recommendation that report number ILS 2021-36 be approved. And that is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Fisher, and Councillor Hallman. You have a comment or question?
Thank you. Yes, through the mayor. Sorry, I was intending to have that pulled to ask the clerk to add something to that.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yes, Councillor Hallman, or what were you requesting?
Yes, so I'm just looking to, when you're bringing a procedural bylaw back, I'm just wondering if you can add to that review of the procedural bylaw to change the word from land acknowledgement to territory acknowledgement. Working with the local Indigenous community, they have let us know that there's the difference between that. So I'm just hoping that perhaps, since we're having something come back with it anyway, that could be explored and brought back, then just changing whenever we use land to territory.
That is excellent feedback to receive, Councillor Hallman. Thank you. And if anyone out there is listening, if there's other feedback of that nature that you want to provide through to us, we do appreciate it. We'll be receiving comments with regards to this procedural bylaw up until the Wednesday prior to the meeting. So if you do have other comments, I welcome them. But this is excellent feedback because, as we've talked about before, we're all on a learning and growing path, and these are the sorts of things that it's great to hear. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, to Ms. Middleholtz. I'd already asked the question with Ms. Middleholtz, but I just thought I'd throw this out so that we can maybe perhaps see if the change can happen if other members of council. So on 7.9.2 E, the second shall, I'd like to have that changed to a may, and it could be obviously open for discussion because I'm the one that's bringing it forward. The idea being is that sometimes maybe perhaps depending on the topic of conversation, an applicant may want to go last. I believe it hasn't happened yet, but being locked into the shall, an applicant may want to ask that question. It's just something I'm putting forward to change the second shall. And if council doesn't have any disagreements, that's fine. But if they have any input, I'd appreciate that. So 7.9.2 E, the second shall, if it can be changed to a may.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Once again, great to have the feedback and to have it in advance like this. I'll be able to discuss this, of course, with the Director of Development Services, anyone else in planning staff, and we can come forward with a recommendation and for staff's for council's consideration. So thank you. I appreciate the comments as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we have mover and seconder, so all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is the corporate services IT master plan. Ashton, I assume you're taking control of this.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So this report outlines the award of the contract for the IT master plan and cybersecurity/disaster recovery plan. As noted in the report, the township was successful under intake 2 of the municipal modernization program. Basis of this program looks at municipal efficiencies. So through this comprehensive master plan, it's going to have a 5-year outlook on IT services for the township. For the township. So through the we issued an RFP to appoint a consultant for the project, and through that RFP process, it was identified that Valencia IIP advisors were the successful proponent, and we'd like to bring that forward to council to approve the award of that contract.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through the mayor to Ashton, was there any discussion with the other 3 municipalities regards to the joint service delivery review to see if they were willing to join in to reduce the cost of cybersecurity?
Through your Mayor Strong, to Councillor Fisher. Sorry, so what context with respect to the plan of itself, or just normal initiatives like that might be, for example, joint procurement, or with respect to the plan itself?
I think what I was referring to is sharing the cost, maybe, with the other 3. But do they have cybersecurity systems in place, like Woolwich or Wellesley or North Dumfries?
I can't speak directly to what exactly they do have. With this project in particular, the basis was we didn't reach out to the other municipalities for this particular portion. This was a plan-based approach where we would look at where we would have opportunities to do joint service-based initiatives. So right now, this plan is to kind of look at a comprehensive internally and then identify what can we do that are potentially with other townships as well. That would be a component of the project.
Okay, thank you. So you have the motion. The recommendation that RFP 2021-28 be awarded to Valencia IP Advisors Limited as per their proposal submission August 20th, 2021 in the amount of $68,550.00, excluding, HST. Moved by Councillor Gordic, second by Councillor Fenning. All in favor? Councillor Fenning, you have a comment?
I do, just a comment. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of our IT staff, because they do a lot to keep us sounding okay and looking all right, and able to participate effectively in our meetings and do all of what we have to do virtually these days. And so I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. I know they appreciate that because it's an ongoing problem that they're always solving problems. So we've known that with the new intake, with the new phone system and all kinds of stuff going on. Just so much fun for the IT staff. Keeps them on their toes. So we voted on that and it was passed. So the next item is Project Grand River, and Patrick, you're going to highlight the report and introduce our guests.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. This report provides council and members of the public with a summary of the proposed merger between Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro and Waterloo North Hydro, also known as Project Grand River. As an appendix to the report, you'll find a high-level summary of the proposed merger that was prepared by Grant Thornton, as well as a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, for which staff are seeking approval this evening. Under the proposed merger, as was announced this past Friday, publicly, Wilmot would continue to be a minority shareholder of the newly formed entity with a 4.49% ownership share. The merger is subject to a number of legal agreements and ultimately the approval of the Ontario Energy Board, or OEB. Proceeding with this merger has shareholder benefits directly to the township and will ensure that customers of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro and Waterloo North Hydro continue to receive reliable service at competitive rates both now and well into the future. Over the past several months, I've had the privilege of working alongside Jerry Van Oudegem, CEO of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, and as Mayor Armstrong will concur, this township continues to benefit from Jerry's leadership, and I can verify that Jerry's been a strong advocate for our municipal interests throughout the entire merger negotiation. I've learned a great deal about our local utility from both Jerry and Kitchener-Wilmot Chair Jim Phillips over the course of the past year, and for that I'm truly thankful. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Jerry Van Oudegem and Jim Phillips of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, who will provide a brief overview of the proposed merger.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Patrick. Certainly, we would like to once again thank the council members for allowing us some time on your agenda this evening. We've had many discussions on this topic over the last couple of years, for sure. As you're well aware, a lot of work has been done on many people's parts to get us to this point in time this evening, and that's the consideration of a memorandum of understanding for the potential merger with our colleagues at Waterloo North Hydro. We are pleased to have publicly announced the memorandum of understanding at the press conference this past Friday, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for participating in that press conference. And this evening, we're requesting that council consider your approval of this memorandum of understanding. If your approval is given this evening, we look forward to the community engagement phase that comes next. And at the same time, we'll be working forward in negotiating the merger participation agreement. The solid working relationship that we have had with your senior staff throughout the past number of months has certainly been critical in allowing us to reach this memorandum of understanding. And I dare say it'll also be critical as we continue to negotiate for our merger participation agreement. So with that said, I'll perhaps pass the presentation over to Jerry.
Thank you, Jim, and good evening. My presentation tonight will focus a little bit on background, how we got here, give you at a high level some of the significant pieces of the proposed transaction. And then I'll finish up with some next steps as part of this initiative. So just to move on to the next page. So this Kitchener Power Corp and Waterloo North Hydro Holding Corporation jointly retained Grant Thornton as an independent financial advisor to evaluate this potential merger between the two of us. Kitchener Power Corp and Waterloo North Hydro Holding Corporation are the holding companies for Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro and Waterloo North Hydro, which are the distribution companies. We work very closely with the senior management team of Waterloo North Hydro to take a look at both the benefits of merging the two utilities, as well as the financial model that would accompany that. After a lot of work, the business case and legal and financial issues were carefully identified and evaluated. Independent legal advisors were engaged by each of the organizations which undertook their own legal due diligence as part of this process, and which will be ongoing if the MOU is approved. And finally, peer reviews of both the legal and financial aspects of this business case and financial modeling were also done by our shareholders as part of the work to date. Next slide. So a little bit about what a merged company would look like. The new company would have approximately 158,000 customers with a distribution revenue of about $78 million. So this is similar in size to London Hydro and Alexicon Energy. Alexicon is the utility on the east side of Toronto that would include Pickering, Ajax, and Whitby area. You can see that currently we're just over 100,000 customers, and it would be, a fairly significant step up in terms of being the 7th largest in the province. Next slide. So Waterloo North Hydro really is a natural partner for us to merge with. I mean, we share boundaries with Waterloo North Hydro, and there are many initiatives and projects that we do collaboratively, including, of course, our unregulated affiliate, Grand River Energy, which is also jointly owned with Waterloo North Hydro and with Energy Plus. All total, we would serve an area of approximately 1,100 square kilometers, and we would be responsible for over 3,600 kilometers of overhead and underground distribution lines in the combined service territory. Next slide. So one of the main items of work that we had done to date is to determine what the ownership model would look like if the two companies combined. So valuation was done to determine, what shares each of the 5 municipal partners would own in a new merged company. And as you can see on this pie chart, the Township of Wilmot would own 4.49%, as Patrick mentioned. City of Kitchener would be the largest shareholder of NewCo, and combined, Kitchener and Wilmot would own almost 58% of the new company. Next slide. So in doing our work to evaluate the business case on this proposed merger, there were a number of opportunities that were identified to generate efficiencies and operational savings. All total, we identified approximately $2.9 million annually, and that would primarily accrue through the elimination of some duplicate work in systems, such as administrative, financial, and billing systems, that we each operate independently now, and also through some voluntary employee retirement and attrition over the first 3 years. Our shareholders would benefit from these efficiencies through some additional dividends, but ultimately these savings will be passed on to our customers. Another benefit of this merger that we would achieve is that we would be able to dedicate some significant resources and personnel to focus on the future towards innovation and new technology development. And we'd be able to do that within our existing cost structure. So, our business is changing quickly, and this would give us the capacity really to embrace those new opportunities and/or challenges. From a more practical perspective, of course, the combined workforce would give us additional resources to respond to severe weather across our 5 municipalities. Next slide. So the key customer benefits, we've grouped them into these 4 categories. Retaining local ownership was very important to all 5 of our municipalities. And this really is a local solution that is being proposed, still owned by our municipalities. And as I mentioned earlier, would really position us well to meet the challenges and opportunities of the future. There are cost savings to be had, and so ultimately that can be used to focus on other priorities, but also a larger customer base will allow us to make sure that the local distribution system is well maintained and up to date. The proposal would really create rate stability for the next 10 years for all of the customers of the merged entity. Distribution rates are projected to increase at an annual inflationary rate that's established by the Ontario Energy Board, but is usually less than the rate of inflation. So there's a long-term benefit here in that the rates would be predictable over the next 10 years. After 10 years, we would look at harmonizing the rates between the 2 utilities. But until that happens, we would maintain separate rate zones for the customers of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro and the customers of Waterloo North Hydro. And those rates would not be harmonized until we ensure that all customers benefit from the merger compared to the status quo. So we are looking at a long-term rate harmonization strategy here to make sure that everybody benefits from this merger. In terms of, next slide, shareholder outcomes. As you know, shareholders receive payments from Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro now in the form of both interest income and dividends on their investment in Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro. And under the new proposed merger, there are expected to be some increase in the dividend returns to the municipalities. This is not the main driver of this initiative. The focus, as I mentioned, was on preparing for the future, but we show here what the incremental increase in cash flows would be to each of the 5 shareholders over the first 20 years post-merger. And for Wilmot, you can see it's $800,000 in additional dividends that we would expect we could generate as a result of this transaction. Next slide. So today we are recommending council consider approval of a memorandum of understanding to allow us to continue to move forward with this work. The memorandum of understanding is largely a non-binding statement that really sets out the intent of the parties. All municipal shareholders, all 5, and the 2 holding companies are signatories to this memorandum of understanding. And in the memorandum of understanding, as you can see, there's a number of items addressed, including the governance structure, the equity share ownership that I talked about earlier, and other conditions that would ultimately be defined in detail in a merger participation agreement and a shareholders agreement. Those 2 agreements are both binding agreements, and they would come back to council at a later time. So really, the MOU facilitates the public announcement about the proposed merger and some of the terms and conditions that would govern that the transaction going forward. So next slide. In terms of next steps, if the memorandum of understanding is approved by all 5 councils this week, there's still a lot of work to do before we are ready to present a report to council for final approval of the merger. If it's approved, a community engagement process will begin later this week. And that will give residents an opportunity to learn more about this proposed transaction and to provide their feedback on this initiative in the form of both online feedback as well as some in-person meetings that we're planning for mid-October. The merger participation agreement, which I mentioned, is the binding agreement that details all the intricacies of this transaction. And it's the main document that needs to be completed before final approval is sought. Likewise, unanimous shareholders agreement will need to be completed as well. That will be the governing document after the new company is created, after the closing date. So the plan is that the report on the community engagement, the merger participation agreement, and the shareholders agreement would all come back to council to be presented at a meeting in December, where we would be seeking final approval to proceed with the merger. So that completes my presentation for tonight. Certainly, the chair and I are both available to answer any questions that you might have on the information we presented today. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Holm.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I'm not sure if the Director of Corporate Services or if either one of you want to take the question. I'm just looking for clarification to be provided to the public on where they can get more detailed answers to some of the commonly asked questions that they have been having over the weekend.
Mr. Kelly?
Sure, I can jump in quick, and if Jerry or Jim want to add on to it. So we did do work with a outside company to build a really useful tool, web tool. The website is connectinglocalpower.ca. It's up and live as of just after the announcement on October 1st. So all of the information, maybe not all of the information, the majority of information that any of the public would need to understand the proposed merger in greater detail, they can access on that website. So again, it's connectinglocalpower.ca. And it has a wealth of information there regarding the merger.
Thank you.
Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just wanted to thank Jim and Jerry for their time. I know over the years this has been a sort of an idea that that's been considered, and to see the progress made and to know all the literally years of work that have gone into to getting us to this point, and to our staff who have worked alongside you. Just wanted to acknowledge all your hard work and thank you for where you've got it to, and looking forward to seeing what happens over the next little while, and getting these next steps in place, and then what the OEB has to say, and then proceeding with Project Grand River. So thanks again for all your time and work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks again. Yes, there has been a lot of work, Councillor Gerber. I've sat through a few meetings myself to have discussions about this over the last few years. So we certainly do appreciate the hard work that Jerry's done. And we can't forget that James has been very diligent in this as well. He's and as a former resident of Wilmot, he's had a keen interest despite leaving town. He's still retained his keen interest in looking after Wilmot as well. So And there are no further questions. Then I will read the recommendation. Recommendation that report COR 2021-035 regarding the potential merger between Kitchener Power Corp, KPC, and Waterloo North Hydro, WNH Holding Corporation, Project Grand River, PGR, be received for information purposes, and further, that the memorandum of understanding regarding a proposed merger between Kitchener Power Corp and Waterloo North Hydro Holding Corporation, attached as Appendix B, be approved. And that is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. So thank you very much. Now on to the next layer of work, gentlemen. Thank you. So our next item is from Fire Services. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Happy to present this report to council tonight on a great deal of work that has occurred between February and now. We promised we'd come back to council with some actions, and this is our first layer of actions with the shared service level agreement with the training program that we were going to undertake with the 4 townships with your approval. The report details all of the recommendations that were brought forward in February, and I'm here to answer any questions that council may have.
Comments or questions? Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. So one of my comments would be about the public education piece. I want to, I didn't see anything in there with regards to having our communication specialists involved with that. So I feel that that would be something that should be also added or looked at, as well as are we with the public education. Perhaps maybe it's just my interpretation, but would there also be with the would there also be communication sent out with regards to the education still with our social media options, that we aren't going to be putting all of our education into one publication? I have a bit of a concern with that. So I wanted to ensure that our Facebook, our social media, and other avenues of information are going to be utilized, as well as having Ms. Baird involved with the communication that goes out with regards to the education.
Thanks, Councillor Gordick. To your point, the intent of this joint merger is, or sorry, it's not a joint merger. This service level agreement is to, for example, Fire Prevention Week would be an opportunity where the 4 townships could do some joint messaging, leveraging all of our collective media programs. There's no intent whatsoever to not use our existing social media platform. We will continue to use our ILS department extensively like we have, and we'll continue to do so. Where the autonomy is still there for all of the townships to continue to do all of those things, because we have all our own unique needs and circumstances as well. And we can't take that autonomy away from Wilmot or the other townships as well. So we will continue to leverage all of those things going forward. Hence the reason why we didn't put that level of detail into the report. We didn't want to showcase that, given the fact that we're not going to do this as a joint project solely. I hope that answers your question.
I'd still like to see something in the report to clarify for future, so that it doesn't just seem to be that the Rural Post will be our outlook in information source. I personally would like to see that we are using the sources that we have and not like, I would like to see us at least acknowledge that we have other social media, and will we be going to other publications? Will the record be utilized? Will the independent be utilized? So we aren't cutting those streams off for the sake of somebody to take over our education. That's what I have a problem with.
Just to clarify that particular relationship, that paper approached us. I did not approach them. They offered us the free space. I will also point out the Baden Outlook offers us free space as well. We're not affiliated with any particular newspaper in any way, shape, or form, or any media outlet for that matter. If they approach us and offer us free space, we're more than happy to utilize it. Our messaging through fire services is very, it's inclusive and equitable across all media outlets and to all peoples. All we want to do is save lives and save property, and that's always our message. So
okay, thank you.
Ms. Middleholtz?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Of course, I would never speak for Chief Leeson or any other department head, but certainly Ms. Baird works very closely with the public education officer, and that relationship is not going to change. The two of them work very closely. They have a great working relationship when it comes to social media or anything else, media releases and whatnot. As far as the local papers, we did used to have, as everyone knows, one paper that was put out on a weekly basis. We had the one monthly publication, unknown editor, Baden Outlook. And then now we also have Embracing Change as a magazine that comes out on a weekly basis, monthly basis. And now we have 3 weekly newspapers in addition to the Daily Record. So this is a balancing act that is all happening for all departments in regards to communications and looking at spending our advertising dollar best as well. And the Air News, my apologies, I forgot the Air News. How could I ever do that? Valuable paper for New Dundee, certainly. So we're trying to balance it across all of them. And every department, of course, is free to advertise as they feel. But it's certainly from the communications office, we do try and balance it across all of the media sources that we have. And of course, social media, utilizing that to our benefit as well. So.
Follow up then to Ms. Middleholtz. If there's, one of the things that they mentioned on here would be firefighter profiles. I would understand then that perhaps those would also be put on the website if we're going to be doing something like that, so that people would maybe, if we're going to be utilizing some sort of social media, would we also be putting that kind of information up on our website if we're going to do profiles?
So through you, Mayor Armstrong, once again, that is up to each individual department as to how they decide that they want to, shall we say, govern their individual web pages. It's not something that we would dictate by any means. It's every department makes their decisions for themselves. So that's not something I'm going to be able to answer for you, but perhaps I'm not sure if Chief Leeson has a response or not.
Sure, thanks. To you, Mayor Armstrong. To my understanding, we're the only township doing profiles right now. And again, that was a collaborative effort between ourselves and the Baden Outlook to do that. It is a tremendous amount of work, believe it or not, to try and get firefighters to do their bios and put the photos together and get everything to the Baden Outlook on time on the monthly publication is a challenge. I certainly can't speak for the other townships. It's never our intent to bring them in the loop. If they choose to do that, that's fair. We haven't moved to the website yet with our bios because it's just been there's just been so much workload this last year and a half. It's just been overwhelming, to be quite frank.
Councillor Hallman?
Thank you, through the mayor. Thank you, Councillor Gordick, for bringing that up. I had a similar question myself. I guess maybe I'll just direct my question to the acting CAO. Is this something that you could perhaps look at with yourself, and as the new CAO is coming in, with more broadly with how the township and the directors communicate different things going on with the municipality and juggling that communication strategy through the newspapers? If we kind of give that back to you to kind of look at that, is that appropriate?
Through the mayor, certainly. I made a note already, and we'll definitely have that discussion with the incoming CAO just to take a look at our communications piece with respect to that. Absolutely.
See no further questions? So the recommendation that council approves the Township Fire Services Shared Training Program Service Agreement between the Township of North Dumfries, Township of Wellesley, Township of Wilmot, and the Township of Woolwich as attached to this report, and that the CAO be authorized to sign and execute the Township Fire Services Shared Training Program Services Agreement pending approval of the agreement by all partner municipalities. That is moved by Councillor Fenning and Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is the alternative voting. Ms. Murray.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'm pleased to present to Council the staff report on alternative voting methods for the 2022 municipal election. As you're aware, legislation requires that all municipalities in Ontario choose their voting method for the 2022 municipal election by May 1st of 2022. As outlined in the report, staff are recommending approval in principle, internet and paper voting. If approved, staff will do further research on actual costs and report back to council in early 2022 for the final decision. Where possible, staff will work with the other townships for cost-saving opportunities, and we're available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. So in the report, it mentioned that there's another municipality in Waterloo Region using internet voting. Was there any issues that you were aware of by doing that? And I know you don't know a cost yet, but do you have some sort of ballpark cost what it would cost for internet voting?
As you're aware, there was, through you, Mayor Armstrong, sorry, there was, at the last municipal election, there was some issues with the internet voting. The best way that we can explain it, as Ms. Middleholtz and I were speaking about this earlier today, is that essentially the data that was going through the system, say was going through the diameter of a cup. Human error caused that cup to turn into the diameter of a straw. So that's what caused the glitches in the last one. It has that provider that was that happened to has now has safeguards in place to avoid any of that happening again. And I think it would be safe to say that all of the other providers probably have done the same thing. And your second question is costs. We don't really have any costs right now. It would just be a guess. So I don't have any idea.
Thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you for the mayor. Really thankful for this opportunity. It was really engaging to read the feedback and then get phone calls during this process that the survey was open. I really found it very interesting that voters who are, I'm just going to paint a broad brush with like under 40, kind of said, you know, if I have to go in, I'm not voting. And then over 40 were like, if I have to vote online, I'm not voting. So I think we've come to a very unique time in history where this is really important that both are valid, and I think the data reflects that. So I'm thankful that your department is exploring this fully to make sure that both people who prefer those voting methods will have the most ability to participate in the democratic process that they choose. I did have one more question, I guess, for Ms. Middleholtz. I'm just curious with, just on this topic, with voting and polling stations and that sort of thing, will you be addressing wards before the next election or no? Okay, I wasn't sure if just with more developments happening in the community, kind of what that would look like, or if it wouldn't be looked at this time around.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. So certainly to review wards, we would have had to have started that process quite a while ago. It is a very, very lengthy process to undertake. At this point in time, no, we would not be readdressing wards. Yeah, there has been some more building in New Dundee as well. No, sorry, Baden and New Hamburg. I don't know what happened there. But it not to the point where we would necessarily have to reevaluate the ward structures. The two rural wards have largely been unchanged as well. So it's just not, if we were to be continuing with paper and tabulator voting, I would have reevaluated the polls. So that's sort of the next step down. But there didn't seem, since if this is what we're going ahead with, then no, we're not going to be changing the polls.
Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I was just wondering if there's any, or if you saw any information on the impact of turnout rates on those areas that had begun to use some internet voting last election. I know that's certainly one of the, one of the purported advantages of that system. I just wondered, in those municipalities that began to use internet voting, did they see their participation rates increase?
So I'm not sure if Ms. Murray has a response to this, but certainly what I have heard, and this is I'm going to make myself sound really old, and that's not my intention, because I'm not. In my years of being in the clerk's department, there have been times where people have said that the voter turnout has not changed significantly as a result of internet voting or online voting, however you wish to phrase it, whereas others have said that they have seen an increase. My feelings on this is more that if you want to vote, you're going to vote regardless of the manner in which that you cast your ballot. It is the issues. So if there is, shall we say, a hot topic that is going on in your municipality, that's going to bring people out. I'm going to avoid eye contact with anyone. As I say, it depends on who's running. It depends if there's a race for mayor. As you can see from our historical data, the year that we had a mayoral race where former Mayor Roth had stepped down, and so we were going to definitely have a new mayor, and we had 4 running that year, if memory serves me correctly. And we had now 2 councillors in Ward 6, Ward 4, and we had 6 people running. My apologies, numbers aren't my thing tonight. So yeah, that's what that's why we had a nearly 47% turnout. And of course, it depends on your demographics as well. Morningside, wonderful community. In my time here, 75% turnout at every election. That's amazing. And certainly if every municipality wants those sorts of numbers, but really it comes down to what's happening in the municipality as to whether or not you're going to have a lot of people come out. It's not necessarily driven by the type of ballot.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Oh, Councillor Gordick.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Armstrong, just a bit of a follow-up to Councillor Hallman. When Ms. Middleholtz mentioned hadn't looked at the redrawing of the boundaries and because of the time. I'm looking at the numbers, and we, from the last election 14 to 18, we only gained about 900 residents according to the total numbers, which is, that seems fair to not worry about it. With what you'd said though, what would be, is there a number that would trigger, and how long does that process take if we were to sort of redefine some of those boundaries, not necessarily needing a new councillor perhaps, but maybe rejigging the wards to reflect the, especially the growth in Baden that potentially is coming?
So through you, Mayor Armstrong, I'm not going to get too into the weeds on this because there actually is a, theories behind ward boundaries and how you draw them and whatnot. So as for numbers, getting to the point where, say, Councillor Fisher, as the councillor for Baden, let's say, with the Ward 3, it had grown to an unmanageable number. Okay, so at that point we would take a look, or if it just seemed it was incredibly off balance. So our rural wards are always going to be what they are. So if sort of Baden creeped up to that point where it was no longer manageable, and it seemed like it was incredibly off balance with the 2 in New Hamburg versus the other urban ward. So if it seemed incredibly off balance, then we would take a look at that. So what we did 14 years ago is we hired, actually at that time it was Dr. Robert Williams. So we first met him. He got involved in our ward boundary review. So it involved a lot of community consultation, having open houses, drawing different options for people to look at and review. And we did that in the year before the election. So it was in 2010. So we did that in 2007 and 2008. And then the next election was in 2010. Coincidentally, my daughter being 13. So that's how I remember these. But yeah, that's how that worked. So it took a good 2 years before the election. We did that.
I just realized, I was more what I really was just kind of wondering the process, not necessarily, like you said, don't go into the weeds. Just is there like at least a good couple of years? So if we were thinking of doing that, it would probably be just after this next election to look at something to see, again, taking into account how unmanageable perhaps Baden could be for the incoming councillor. Yeah,
and through you, Mayor Armstrong, certainly from a staff review point, we are looking at those sorts of variables as to decide when a ward boundary review would be necessary. That being said, when we did undertake that review, I believe it was at the direction of council. So certainly it is something that council could have requested last year, and we could have undertaken it. Yeah.
Thank you. No further questions. The recommendation that council approve in principle the alternative voting method of internet and paper voting for the 2022 municipal and school board elections, and further that council delay the final decision and adoption of an authorizing bylaw until staff report back to council on vendor solutions and pricing. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gordick, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. There's no correspondence. And the recommendation on bylaws, that bylaw number 2021-45 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in open council. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next is notice of motions. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm tabling a motion tonight to be considered at the next council meeting. I will read it through. Whereas telecommunication towers and antennas are an important means of providing satellite service for cell phones and other electronic devices. And whereas the township zoning bylaw number 83-38, as amended in 2020-26, permits the installation of telecommunication towers and antennas in all zones. And whereas requests for telecommunication towers and antennas are increasing in the township. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Wilmot directs staff to provide a report examining possible policies, procedures, and bylaws regarding telecommunications infrastructure within the Township of Wilmot, including but not limited to the following: a public consultation process regarding any proposed telecommunication and antenna installations and protocols, a consistent and timely process for the review of telecommunication installations within the Township of Wilmot, examination of potential protocols to address locations, siting of telecommunication facilities in a manner which minimizes the effects on residents, visual impacts, and respects natural and human heritage features and sensitive lands, while recognizing the jurisdiction of Industry Canada with respect to the implementation of health, safety, and environmental standards, and exercising its authority to approve the location of telecommunication towers and antennas. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. That's received and will come back to see us. Next is announcements. And that's contains my report. You've all received it. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, just continuing on with announcements. Just wanted to let the large viewing public and of course other members of council, just a reminder to them of the official opening of the artificial turf field on Thursday. Events kick off at 4 o'clock with a Ducky field hockey game, followed by 5 or 5:30, Ms. Jackson. I'm going to say 5:30 for the official ceremonies, and I'm sure you won't want to miss the well-spoken dignitaries and their inspirational words, along with more importantly, food trucks and activities for the family. And then a Wilmot soccer game at 6 o'clock, followed by the first Waterloo Oxford football game played under the lights, Thursday night lights in Wilmot on the turf field, kickoff at 7 o'clock. So I look forward to seeing members of the community celebrate the opening of that facility. It's been, I've had a chance to drive by a few times after school and just to see 3 or 4 different teams and groups out there sort of sharing the field and getting their work in has been a lot of fun. And I know the community, of course, Wilmot Soccer, et cetera, will enjoy the new facility as well.
Yes, thank you. We all look forward to that. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. I did want to ask you a question, Mayor, with your report. I appreciate your learning and unlearning that you're committed to doing. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that you can share from your recent list that you provided to council and to everyone for accountability. Just one piece of something that you've taken the time that you've unlearned.
Well, to be honest, Councillor Hallman, I don't think I've unlearned anything because I've believed what I've studied all along. I've made some notes as to my takeaways, and I've always said how we have so much work to do. Still true. I can never understand what it was like. So many different views make it difficult to come to the table and talk. People like the First Peoples Group and other Indigenous consultants who work with us every day, hopefully they can find what is needed to bring people together just to start the conversation in a productive way. As we uncover more of what happened at the residential schools, we have to wade through the inconsistencies and come at the truth. But no matter what, one child not making it home is too many.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Through you, Chair, can I continue with my list of announcements?
Of course you can.
All right. I want to thank the New Dundee community who came out to help contribute to planting trees over the weekend. We had a couple of staff members, Ms. Jackson and Mr. Evie were there as well. It was so great. There were so many young kids and young at heart that were there. It was really beautiful to see everyone contributing. And there was a tournament going on at the Ball Diamonds at the same time. So my daughter and I were discussing how we were planting shade for 30 years down the road from now. And it was a really, an aha moment for her. She was like, you know what, I'll be bringing my kids here and there'll be shade. So, this is what it's all about. So that was really exciting and deeply appreciative of everyone and all the layers involved in the community to make this happen. I also wanted to acknowledge that today, October 4th, is acknowledging and mourning for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and the Two-Spirit community. According to the RCMP, there was over 1,000 documented missing, and according to families and of the Indigenous community, they believe there's more like 4,000 that are actively missing in Canada or Turtle Island. So when we hear stories in the media, keep that in mind and think about the atrocities that are occurring for this population in our community. I also wanted to discuss quickly, or just bring to the attention, that just because Orange Shirt Day has passed on the 30th, reconciliation does not end on the 30th. It is our job to keep that orange shirt out, to keep that spirit of that meaning out, and to make sure that we continually advocate and create space and remember that it's our part as settlers to do the work of reconciliation. So let's keep that on the forefronts of our mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have an announcement that the deputy clerk has revisited council for the day. Okay, so I'm just going to read what I've been told to say. The township hosts a Council for a Day contest open to all grade 5 students in Wilmot. All grade 5 students in the township are invited to submit an essay and outlines that Wilmot means, what Wilmot means to you, and what your Wilmot would look like if you made the decisions. Council will choose the winners. Winners will be rewarded with gift packages and honored at the November council meeting. Deadline for submissions of the essay is October 15th, 2021, with winners announced during local government week. So any information or submissions, you contact the deputy clerk, Ms. Murray, at 519-634-8444 to enter. So let's get some essays going, and we know that the grade 5 students are really into municipal politics. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. We had a lovely presentation, a really great presentation from Reap Green Solutions earlier. I also want to highlight that it is Zero Waste Month in Wilmot Township. So I hope that we will all bring our jars to the next council meeting and discuss what's in them.
Sounds like a plan. Are there no further announcements? Seeing none. Confirmatory bylaw, the recommendation that bylaw number 2021-46 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on October 4, 2021, be introduced and read first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. Moved by Councillor Fanning, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. And final recommendation that we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor. Moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now, no rushing home now because the Jays are out. So we'll, I know. Sad news, sad news.